Recording. Okie dokie. So, morning. Hi, everyone. I'm going to do just a wee introduction for today's session. Thank you so much for joining the first role fundamental session of 2024. We are going to hear today from Kate Newton at Multiply and Michael Goldberg from Cara. And it's just a wee 1 hour session on brand and identity. So hopefully this will be a useful session for everyone that's joining. The session is being recorded. So if anybody does want to watch this back, I will share it at the end of the day, or it'll be posted in the newsletter. But yes, without further ado, I will hand over to our lovely speakers, who I'm going to pin for everyone so that we don't lose them.
Oh, nice. The spotlight's on.
The spotlight. There we go.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Kate Newton. I am a creative strategist here at Multiply Agency. I specialise in brand identity and kind of workshops, that type of thing. I have also dabbled in sort of digital, social media, so a bit of a mixed bag. Multiply Agency is based just near the Meadows in Edinburgh, near Summer Hall, and we sort of specialise in a variety of clients, like Kraft Heinz, Seafood Scotland, lots of different types of things. But yeah, that's a bit of an intro.
Cool. Hi everyone, I'm Michael Goldberg. I'm a Senior Account Executive at Cara Edinburgh. For those of you who don't know, Cara is a media planning and buying agency, so we work closely with brands on all aspects of their media strategy, campaign planning, and channel selection. So that's really everything from TV, outdoor, print, digital, social, and beyond. So essentially, in a nutshell, it's our job to design and execute media plans that best reach a brand's target audience and is going to ultimately drive real business results for them. So that's me.
So if you're new to this is our first role fundamentals. It's part of Marketing Society Scotland, and it's basically a session where we offer practical advice. There might be some stuff in here that you already know, some of it might be a bit new, but it's basically aimed at people that are either in their first or sort of second year of their career or at kind of a student level, so you might be about to just start your career, and hopefully it gives you a bit of an insight into marketing in Scotland. And yeah, there'll be loads of these sessions kind of coming up as well, so just keep your eyes peeled. But this is the first one of 2024, so welcome. You're all very special for that.
And just a quick disclaimer before we get going, myself and Kate both work agency side, so our experience is somewhat biased, but we've tried to make today's session relevant to all roles that might fall under the marketing umbrella. So if we just move on to the next slide, we're going to begin by discussing the grand concept of identity. So we'll just go on to the next slide there. Now, it's important to note that identity is a pretty big, all-encompassing concept. It's closely connected to that fundamental question that we all ask ourselves at some stage, I'm sure, which is, who am I? So in a nutshell, identity is really what gives us our sense of self. It's a set of traits that distinguishes us from other people, because we certainly all have some things in common, but everybody does have their own unique combination of traits that really make them who they are. So the reason why it's so interesting in the marketing field and the world of marketing is because the meaning of identity can apply not only to us as individuals, but also some of the most successful, well-recognized brands that we either work with or work for.
And obviously, given that it is such a kind of grand concept, we're so aware that identity has changed over time. And there's like a few factors that can affect this, both in terms of our personal identity and brand identity. So obviously, evolving social constructs, gender, sexual orientation, cultural affiliations have all expanded, especially within the last few years. Technology, you know, like 70 years ago, you probably wouldn't have had a Facebook account. So these days we have an online persona that we tend to align ourselves with. And often this can sort of be like a more enhanced version of ourselves. Globalization and cultural fusion. So it might be that whereas before you would say you're from Scotland, maybe you're raised in lots of different places. So your home and your cultural identity is a lot different. And then your occupational identity, which we'll be talking about a little bit in this talk. So what is your professional identity? Who are you at work? Who are you when you're applying for jobs, if not massively nervous? And just kind of what that is in the workplace as well.
So we're now just going to take a deeper look into brand identity, so what the core elements are, and also some best-in-class examples to really bring this to life. So we just want to pop on to the next slide. Before we look into this, it's really easy to confuse brand identity with brand image, but they are two very different things. So brand image is essentially how an audience perceives and interprets signals coming from a brand through different touch points. A good way to think of it is that brand image really comes from the audience. It's the perception of the brand in the minds of consumers. Brand identity, on the other hand, is what makes a brand unique. It's determined by how the people behind a brand want the public to perceive them. So essentially, brand identity comes from the brand itself, which there's clear parallels there with self-identity, which we'll touch on a bit later on. So let's move on to the next slide there. So now that we've clarified that, let's take a deeper dive into what brand identity is. So it's essentially the unique characteristics that influence a brand's perceived personality, appearance, and behavior in the minds of consumers. So for the purposes of today's talk, we've broken down brand identity down into three key elements. That's the brand's personality, the tone of voice, and visual identity. There are, of course, additional elements that you can explore, but we're going to focus on these three as they're amongst the most important. So to understand brand identity, it's really good and useful to then just think about what makes up a person's personality and their identity. So as we touched on just there, individuals are a combination of elements such as their name, story, personality, values, beliefs, etc. And brand identity really does work in a similar way. So by creating a unique and distinguishable identity, a brand can really differentiate itself from the competition.
And I think often, oops, just going to move everyone over here. I think often when we're talking about brand identity, it is such a kind of alien thing to have a brand that has a platform. So really what we want in your brand is these kind of human factors that means that your consumers can relate to or align themselves with or aspire to be like. So when we're interrogating brands and we're looking at what makes a brand successful, you'll tend to find certain kind of human traits within that. So knowing who you are sounds obvious as a brand, but it's also really important. It's what sets you out from all of your competitors, what sets you above the rest. What are your points of parity and your points of difference? So in this case, with San Miguel, how is that beer, how is that brand different to every other kind of beer brand that there is? Understanding what your brand means today and its history is massively important when talking about identity, because the history of your brand essentially is what shaped who you are today. So an ad that might have been accepted 40 years ago might not be accepted now, but it still makes up kind of your brand identity and where you got to. And then connecting to those deeper human truths, which is more to do with like archetypes, which I'll talk about in a minute. But with this example here, we've obviously got Here's to the Seekers. It connotes a feeling of escapism, adventure, and it kind of gives you that sort of visual clarification that this is a product or this is a brand that you can align with if you're someone who's adventurous and craves a vibrant life. So when we're talking about brand archetypes, this is a little bit of theory, but we won't go too far into it. But basically, the brain loves to categorize. So when it comes to identity, although that is something that is unique to all of us individually, there are certain types of groups or categories that the brain just automatically kind of assigns and aligns people and brands with. In this case, we're looking at brand archetypes. So you'll see on the right has a diagram which has Sage, the explorer, the lover, the magician. And when we're interrogating brands and looking at brand identity, this is a really good way to kind of set up your brand for success. So the archetype will uncover what the goals, desires, and motivations are of the brand. So an example of this would be like Brewdog, who are connoted as the outlaw, is in the sense of a lot of the marketing that they do tends to be a bit political or a little bit rebellious. They have law cases, things like that. It's not necessarily recommended, but it does ultimately align with who they are as a brand and kind of makes them stand out. Think about Tennent's, it's quite an iconic Scottish brand. They are very similar to the Everyman. It gives you a sense of belonging. There's a kind of sense of connection there as well. But it's quite a good way to kind of look at lots of different brands, whether it's a luxury brand, a new brand, how many times can you say brand, and aligning it with this wheel is kind of a good way to categorize and get to know brand identity further.
So the first key element of brand identity is brand name and personality. The brand name itself might sound like an obvious one, but it's often the first thing that customers and consumers hear or see. So it should be memorable, distinctive, and really easy to spell and say. More importantly, though, is the brand's personality, which is essentially a set of human characteristics attributed to a brand. So a strong brand personality should really elicit an emotional response from the brand's target audience. Human beings really are more likely to engage with brands which they themselves can identify with. So broadly speaking here, there are 5 types of brand personalities with common traits. So you've got excitement, so that's a brand that comes across as carefree, spirited, playful, modern, trendy, and youthful. You then got sincerity. This is a brand that really places a focus on kindness, thoughtfulness, environmental sustainability, or worthwhile causes like care for workers and communities, etc. There's ruggedness, so those brands that are really rough, tough, outdoorsy, and athletic. Competence, which is brands that portray themselves as really accomplished, influential in their field, or as a real authority and leader in a certain discipline. And then finally, sophistication, which is brands that place an emphasis on elegance, prestige, or the exclusive, luxurious nature of their products. So we pop on to the next slide. We're going to take a look just quickly at some best-in-class examples of brand personality. Now, it is worth saying these are extremely famous case studies, but they really are worth noting because there's a reason why they're so successful. So first of all, Dove is widely known for having a really sincere and caring brand personality. Their really well-known Real Beauty campaign called out traditional brand images as retouched and photoshopped, placing the spotlight on a diverse group of real people. Now, because Dove consistently present their brand personality as thoughtful and genuine, they appeal to customers and consumers who don't want to be associated with traditional beauty standards. They've made themselves synonymous with championing the real people who make up their target audience, which is why it's so effective. Another example on the next slide is Nike, and another brand that we're all, I'm sure, extremely familiar with. Their brand personality is all about excitement. Their famous tagline, "Just Do It," evokes a sense of drive, motivation, and pursuing new goals. So just like Dove, in a way, Nike's marketing campaigns are consistent and distinctive. They commonly show people overcoming obstacles or achieving goals while wearing Nike apparel. So their brand personality feels active, it feels ambitious, it feels inspirational, and these are all personality traits that crucially resonate with their core target audience, which could be anything from athletes to sport, fitness enthusiasts, etc. So the key to the success of these 2 brands is that they've really nailed what means a lot to their target audience and identified themselves with them.
So just moving on to tone of voice, obviously this is a massive part of your brand identity and it shouldn't be overlooked. I'm slightly biased because I do work in this, but I do think that tone of voice, there's a lot in terms of AI and things that are coming out, but this is something that needs to be so consistent when you're looking at a brand. But as humans, tone of voice is the way that we speak, it's our intonation, it's more linguistic. The brand's tone of voice is how a brand communicates with its audience through messaging and customer interactions. And always think of tone of voice as being this one massive consistent thing that is going across your online and your offline spaces. Basically, when you're looking at a tone of voice and you're trying to interrogate what should our tone of voice be as a brand, you want to look back at your brand values. So if you're a brand that's very much an everyday, you might be FMCG, you're targeting children or you're targeting families, you might be slightly more informal, maybe a little bit humorous, quite optimistic. If you're a brand that is luxury, if you're looking at like LVMH or something like that, you might actually say a lot less, but when you do speak, it is incredibly formal, it's sophisticated, and all of these things should ideally just align back to your brand. The most successful way of knowing that your tone of voice is kind of doing, that made no sense. When you know your tone of voice is successful, you're basically able to build a really strong, memorable, and distinctive brand identity. So if you were to look at a billboard and you couldn't even see the brand logo, but you were able to kind of recognize the tone of voice, then that would be kind of, you'd know that your brand tone of voice is super successful. So yeah, don't underestimate this as a massive part of the brand.
So a really good example of a brand that's really nailed tone of voice is Irn-Bru. So they are very, very well known, especially here in Scotland, for their comedic and irreverent tone of voice. The core to this is they really refuse to take themselves too seriously, and they manage to come across as authentically Scottish rather than forced in every marketing communication that they make. So it's really down to this consistent tone of voice and deep understanding of what appeals to their target audience, which are predominantly in Scotland, that many of Irn-Bru's campaigns are still spoken about, they're still quoted, memed, enjoyed years after their release. So I think Irn-Bru are a really good Scottish example of where tone of voice is consistent and effective.
Another kind of example that we looked at as well is innocent smoothies. So this is more of an example of having quite a human brand tone of voice, but then across your comms, you're changing that. So specifically on social media, it makes it sound like we're speaking directly to their marketing team, hence their Twitter bio, which is like, please buy our drink so we don't get fired. It's obviously really transparent. It's quite comedic. It's brutally refreshing, but it's still relatable, and it builds that connection with the brand in an online space where really what we're just talking about is smoothies and buy a smoothie. But again, this is just an example that goes to show that having that human feeling to a brand, having something that customers and consumers can resonate with, gives you that sense of trust. And if you're likely to trust a brand, you're more likely to buy from that brand. So yeah, another good example.
So the third and final key element of brand identity that we're going to look at today is visual identity. So in a nutshell, a brand's visual identity is really just a combination of graphic elements that represent and identify it. So this could be anything from its logo, its color palette, typography, imagery, and other design elements. So a solid visual identity is really what helps to create that brand recognition. So when consumers see a logo or a set of colors, they should be able to recognize and identify the brand immediately. It's certainly good to think of visual identity as being that visible expression of the brand's personality and tone of voice, other two key factors. Each of these elements needs to work together in harmony to create that consistent, cohesive, and ultimately memorable cut-through brand identity.
And then just kind of go through a few examples of this that are successful. So like Michael just said, having that consistency is really important when it comes to visual identity. And I think when you're at this stage of building a brand or kind of creating what that visual identity is, you want to, again, bring it back to the values of the brand. So if we're looking at Headspace, we know that this is an app that if you're feeling a bit vulnerable or if you're feeling like you need that kind of mental health support, they are there to provide that. So when we look at the color palette, it's very bright, it's warm, it's very welcoming. The human essence kind of comes through when we're looking at the characters and the illustrations and these kind of friendly little faces. There's a consistent use of font so that you know that whenever you kind of see that font, you've got that association. And yeah, there's consistency throughout everything that they do. So the top left is their Instagram feeds, the right is their website, the bottom left shows the app. So those colors are being used across every platform so that no matter where you're targeted or where you see them, it will always look the same. On to the ordinary. So I think one thing that's quite important is that when it comes to brands, it's always about what people are kind of saying if you're not in the room. So a lot of brands rely on associations. When we're looking at skincare, a lot of the associations people want are things like cleanliness and hygiene and science, because science backs the fact that the kind of product knows what it's doing. In this case, with The Ordinary, we've got a really minimalist color palette, so it feels clean, and the photography itself is quite modern looking. So again, feels a little bit sciencey. The product design itself carries that as well. And again, you have that consistent look and feel across all platforms, so digital, out of home, and more. I think in this example, one thing that's good to touch upon is in the Instagram feed on the right, you can obviously see there's like two posts that have these little touches of pink. And that's from when they launched a kind of recent product, which is pink in terms of the liquid itself. And it just goes to show that then when you have quite a minimal looking grid, you can have a lot of fun with color as well. So it's quite obvious when something new's come out, when you do a lot of kind of campaign content outside of your like evergreen, everyday brand content, it really sticks out. But again, it's a good use of the like brand visual identity, and you can see that consistency across all of it. And then just onto an Edinburgh-based one. So this is Iola, or possibly Iola. And this is just kind of show you an example of in-store and online. So on the website, you can obviously see they've got that like orange banner that goes across the top showing a discount. On app and on your iPhone, you can see that again, there's that orange border. And then when they went into the new St. James Quarter, they carried that orange into the store. So as you can see along the shelves where the glasses are, you've got the orange lining as well. It's mostly just really important because when it comes to visual identity, it's not just sort of looking at an ad, it's bringing people into your brand world. So whether or not you open the website on your phone or you step into the store, either way you want to immerse the consumer into your brand world, and visual identity is obviously such a massive part of that. So yeah, hopefully that gives a bit of a kind of insight into some best-in-class examples of visual identity. And then just in terms of some learnings from this that can just be taken away. Consistency, I feel like I've mentioned a ton of times, but having that cohesive visual language, a consistent color palette, typography, and design elements will just set you up for success. It's how people remember your brand, it's how it's recognizable. And then just in terms of the visual elements, make sure it aligns with your core values and your personality. If you were a brand that's really trying to promote sustainability, you're more likely to go for kind of these earthier colors, things that kind of align with nature. It needs to kind of make sense with what it is that your brand stands for. Otherwise, it's very difficult for consumers to relate to. And I'll hand over to Michael for the last bit, because this is what you specialize in. So
yeah, so finally, it's really important to design your visual identity with adaptability in mind. So consider its application across a variety of platforms and media channels. There's more than ever at the moment. So you really do have to make sure that your brand elements are scalable, they're readable, and they're visually appealing on a variety of different devices and formats. That could be anything from desktop, smartphones, print, billboard, TV, etc. A strong brand identity should really translate well across all touch points. This is a really important consideration that we make here at Cara when we're planning cross-channel campaigns for our clients.
cool. So moving into professional identity. So what is your professional identity? I mean, it's a bit of a weird one. Obviously, we're all ourselves, we're all human, but when it comes to the work environment, we're likely to be a little bit different. And this comes down to accommodation theory, which is basically how we alter our language to suit the people that we're surrounded by. In a job interview, you're likely to be more formal. With your colleagues, you might be a bit more relaxed. With clients, you might be a bit more kind of confident. And your professional identity goes beyond your LinkedIn profile, but this will obviously come in handy when applying for jobs. So your career identity should really reflect your values, beliefs, and your passions, and it might even be what you kind of want to be known for. A lot of people, especially in an agency setting, that's the ideas person, that's the design person, and it's kind of a good way of making that association in your career as well. Why is it important? Because knowing who you are, this one's a bit deep, but knowing who you are and what you're passionate about is going to help shape and refine your career path. When I was starting out going from uni, I think I was just kind of applying for any job because it felt like I didn't really know where I stood. But then it led to a lot of roles that I think I wanted, but then didn't necessarily want. And I think figuring that out is obviously absolutely fine. It's fine to not immediately know what it is that you want to do in your career. This is a picture of me in 2001. It's not a million miles away from what I was doing, what I'm doing now. But again, it's fine not to know what this is. Michael and I will talk a little bit about how we got into marketing and yeah. Is this you, Michael? I can't remember.
So I'm just going to go through some top tips on enhancing your online identity. So these are really going to be relevant when it comes to applying for first jobs or really just navigating those early stages of your career. So first off, have a dedicated website. It's an ability that we've all got now. When applying for roles in marketing, you might want to go beyond just that traditional CV and cover letter. So having a dedicated website or even just a landing page that shows your portfolio or experience is a great way to stand out from the crowd. Go further than LinkedIn. I think we all know that LinkedIn is a great platform for networking and getting into the industry, navigating it. But even having a dedicated Instagram account or a TikTok profile that showcases your skills, which if you're creatively minded, could be a portfolio of creative work or blogs and articles you've rated that pertain to the industry in some way, and that's only going to enhance your online presence. Be consistent with it. Algorithms really do favor consistency. So post your wins, talk about your updates and your learnings from different events that you've been to, because that's what's going to ensure that your profile keeps rising to the top. Don't shy away. I know it's easier said than done because not everyone enjoys talking about themselves, which is completely understandable and reasonable. But highlighting your wins and getting into that habit of talking about your achievements is really what's going to stand you in good stead throughout your career. And then finally, be aware of your digital footprint. Again, a slightly obvious one, but always a good reminder. You want to make the best first impression that you possibly can on any prospective employers that you apply for jobs with. Which leads us on nicely to talking about the do's and don'ts of CV writing. So now when you're starting out in your career with no previous experience, for example, it can be difficult to know how to construct your CV. So some things you definitely should do is keep it concise and keep it relevant. Try and address the most important points in a clear, easy to digest way. Again, another obvious one, choose a professional font. This helps to ensure that your CV can be easily read and simply scanned. It should go without saying, but remember, Comic Sans is not your friend when it comes to job applications. Present things in a logical order, so use sufficient spacing and clear section headings, so skills, education, previous experience, etc. It's also good to complete these in reverse chronological order to make sure that you're highlighting your most recent achievements first. Again, play to your strengths. For example, certainly if you're just coming out of university, if you feel as though a lack of work experience is what's holding you back, lead with your educational or extracurricular experience instead. As long as you keep relating it back to the role in question, how you order the sections is completely up to you. And crucially, it's really important to tailor each CV to the job that you're applying for. There really isn't a one-size-fits-all. The people that are reading your CV will be able to easily tell a generic one from a tailored one, so keep that in mind. Talk about your passions, talk about your goals. Essentially, why do you want to work here and what value will you bring? Even if that's not work experience, it could just be your raw enthusiasm for what that company does. And then finally, use bullet points and maintain consistent formatting throughout. It just, again, helps to add that professional sheen to whatever job application that you do. And then briefly, just things to avoid. There's less of these, but again, just don't try and include too much information or worse, irrelevant information. Leave out any spelling or grammatical errors. Again, it's all about that first impression. Don't include out-of-date contact details, which is ultra obvious, but it's important to always double check this so that companies can follow up with you. And finally, do not forget the cover letter. This really is your chance to make a job application as personal to the company and to the role as possible. It's also that extra opportunity to sell yourself, so make sure that you take it.
I think as well, just on this, if you are quite a creative person, your cover letter can come in so many different formats. Previously, when I had a contact worked for a publishing house, their cover letter, they put it into like a little book format and actually posted it to the office, which in the world that we live in, where so many job applications are electronically submitted, don't lose sight of that. If you think you've got a really cool idea, that will help you stand out as well. So based off of the original talk that we're doing our talk from, which was Richard Simpson's, he talked a bit about embracing change. So we thought we'd talk a little bit about how we've embraced change in our careers and how we've kind of got to where we are now. So I studied English language and literature at university. I didn't study marketing. I didn't even really know that I wanted to do marketing at the time. And then basically came to Edinburgh for the Fringe. It was supposed to just be for a week, and now it's been 5 years. And essentially from that, applied to lots of different agencies, sent an email that was just like, I will make you tea and coffee for free for a week if you just give me a chance. From that, got an internship at Multiply, which is where I work now. And I think even at that point, although I was happy to have kind of kicked off my career, I still wasn't 100% sure what my professional identity would be and what my role would be. So at the time I was 21 and I started in social media. It's what I knew, it's kind of what I did best. And then a few years down the line, I got into more of an account exec role. I remember when they offered me that, I was like, I don't want to work in finance. And they were like, it's not a finance role. And I was like, right, okay, that just says it all. And then from that in 2021, I started working more with our insights and innovation team at Multiply and realized just how much I enjoyed the kind of brand side of things, and workshops in general feel very human. So you're constantly meeting people, you're getting to work with lots of different brands, and it's just really interesting. You do a lot of things like new product development, you interrogate brands, you can create positionings, and I think that was kind of just where I landed, and it's going pretty well, so that's good. But I do think the kind of main thing that I would like to kind of put across from this is, again, it's fine to not immediately know what it is that you want to do in marketing. You can have an interest in digital, you can want to do social. It might even be that you start in marketing, but you want to go into more of a PR role. But it is a very fluid industry. And once you're in it, there are a lot of opportunities, and the marketing society is so good for that as well. So yeah, that's kind of me. Michael?
Yeah, so I finished university in 2019 and then started applying for my first job in the marketing advertising industry. Now, as I'm sure a lot of people in the call are finding out, there are so many different types of companies and roles that kind of fall under that marketing umbrella. But I was lucky enough to get an entry-level role in outdoor advertising exclusively. But while in that role, the whole world faced the biggest collective change in recent memory. So the onset of COVID, lockdowns, and working from home. I had to adjust to working from home immediately after only a few months of working in an office for the first time, which was pretty daunting on a number of fronts. But it also raised a real sense of uncertainty about the future in general. I did wonder if my career in the industry would end before it even started. So I learned very quickly about the importance of adapting to change, embracing it, and then making the best out of unexpected situations. It's really similar to Kate, where I worked in a couple of different roles before really knowing what it was that I wanted to do. Like Kate says, it's really fine, and it really is fine not to know what your area of interest is before you start your career, or even a few years into it. Just be open-minded, experience as much as you can, and it'll all work out. I think is what we would say.
And then these are just a few learnings that we took from the previous talk to this one. So this was some of Richard's advice, which was all to do with the power of breathing and meditation and being present. And the marketing industry and agencies, especially, can be very fast-paced. So I think being able to counteract that stress, separate yourself from it, is really important, especially when applying for jobs. That can be quite an emotionally draining task. You feel like you're putting yourself out there, going for interviews. So just kind of stay centered, keep going, keep in perspective will also help burnout. Know your expectations as well. I think a lot of the time when I was first starting out, I was applying for jobs that were probably like 30K above the salary, because for some reason I felt like I could go for that at the time, despite having absolutely no experience. Whereas then it kind of got into a bit of a shift of like, okay, it's fine to just kind of kickstart your career, even if it's a role you don't necessarily want to do at this stage. You can probably move from that and kind of map out your progress. And then just remember what keeps you motivated. If you love marketing and you want to work in marketing, brilliant. If you love marketing for 2 years and then you start to not enjoy it, it's fine to move on and do something else. But ultimately, you'll know that you've kind of set yourself up for success by just kind of listening to your own self as well. And finally, these are just some of the core learnings we've pulled together from this talk that you can take away. So in terms of identity, obviously, as we've discussed, this is a definition that is constantly evolving. And so when it comes to brands, your brand should be evolving with that definition too. With brand identity, we know that brand image is different to brand identity. One comes from the audience, one comes from the brand itself. We've talked about visual identity when it comes to consistency with your color palette, typography, and imagery. And your visual identity should also be adaptable for all platforms, so that people like the very talented Michael can help you in terms of publishing that everywhere. And then lastly, in terms of your professional identity, consider what it is that you value in your career. Think about how we've talked about with brands. It comes back to what your brand values are and how you present yourself. It's exactly the same with your professional career. Know what it is that you value and push that into how you present yourself. Go beyond LinkedIn. It's fine to have an online portfolio. It's going to be what makes you stand out. And as we just said there, fine to still be figuring it out. Your career path isn't always linear as well. So yeah, that's us. I'll hand over to you, Mel, because I know there's a few events.
I need to freaking remember to unpin you guys and pin myself. How do I do that? Here we go. It's me. Hello. Yeah, just really quickly, guys, just on some upcoming events that we've got coming up at the Marketing Society. So we have our Digital Day conference, which is taking place in Glasgow on the 18th of April. Most of these events will have more detail on the website, which I've just linked in this slide here. So please do take a look. Bookings will open for all of these kind of on the website and in our newsletters. Again, if you've got any questions about any upcoming events, please don't hesitate to email the Marketing Society or myself. I think everybody has my email address. But yeah, Digital Day is a big one. Glasgow Science Centre, really great event for all things digital. We're going to look at AI. We're going to look at various different digital channels and, you know, the change that's been happening over the last few years. We also have our second First Rule Fundamentals event, which is on the 23rd of April. Details are TBC at this stage, but it will be hosted by some other lovely members of our flag group, just like Michael and Kate. And then lastly, I know there are some future leader members on this call today, so this is primarily for you guys, but any first rollers, just give me a heads up if you do fancy coming along. Future leaders with Paul Menzies, who is the brand director for Tenants and C&C Group. So he'll be doing a session on what it is to build a great and strong brand and just looking at the history of tenants and kind of his experience. So that should be a good one. But yeah, all details on the website. Give me a message if you're interested, and we'll go from there.
Cool. So
Fine. Yeah. This is the question portion of the session, guys. I'm actually just going to unspotlight us. Here we go. So there we go. So if anybody, has any questions for Kate and Michael at this stage, now is your chance to ask them. There's no pressure if there aren't any questions. If you feel like you want to ask questions after the session by email, you can also do that, and we're more than happy to answer them. I think I might just kick off just in terms of professional development, guys. I know that obviously, bigging up the Marketing Society, we do a lot of development events and things that, you guys can come along to and get experience from. But are there any external things that you both did to enhance your own professional careers? For me, for example, I struggle with confidence sometimes, I think maybe in meetings. So I did a session with DebateMate, where we did, the skills on debating and the skills in conversation and presenting and things like that. And I actually feel like that kind of stuff really helped me. Is there anything that you both did that, felt helped you both, or anything you recommend to anybody on this call?
Yeah, I'll go first. That's okay. When I came into the agency, I was doing a lot of social media work, but then I also was helping a lot on digital because of COVID. Our team reduced quite a lot, so I was then picking up some more digital stuff. Didn't really know a lot about digital, but started taking online courses with, I think it's called Google Learning Garage, and it basically has loads and loads of free sessions about like how to use GA, how to set up PPC, and like what is display advertising, and what feels like probably quite basic digital knowledge. But to be honest, it was enough to kind of talk about it in a room with a client, which at the time I really needed. So I would say, because it was free as well, and you would also get a little certificate at the end, which I love, it was a good way to get to know digital a little bit more and just have that as part of my offering as a service. So, yeah.
Yeah, I did a few courses with the IPA when I first started, so the Institute of Practitioners in Advertising, which is not that easy to say, which was really, in terms of like a grounding, a really relevant grounding of how the whole industry functions, especially from agency side, which is something that if you don't do a course like that, you kind of just learn as you go, but it gives you such a sense of confidence to have that foundational knowledge base. So I really seeked out those kind of industry level benchmarks of knowledge that you should have. But in terms of like my career here in the industry in Scotland, that's really what drew me to the Marketing Society, to be honest. I think it does provide that connecting tissue between all the different agencies, the brands and the businesses, etc., that fall under the marketing umbrella, as we say. It really does create that kind of sense of community, which I think just helps naturally in your everyday job to know who you are in the wider space of who everyone else is, because there are so many different businesses that could be involved. So yeah, I think there are lots of great resources in terms of just understanding the nuts and bolts of how the industry works and how your job works. But I think the Marketing Society is the best view you're going to get in terms of how that works in Scotland and the wider scene. I think you're just invaluable for that.
Yep. Thank you. We also just got a question in. I'm really sorry if I butcher the name here. Adiyinka, I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Sorry if I'm not. But can you guys kindly recommend where and how we can easily land a job as a digital marketing student, and primarily remotely? So if you guys got any advice on that, or anybody else on this call, if they've got any advice as well.
Yeah, so I'm happy to kick off. So LinkedIn is a classic, but I think it's quite good because you can also specify your search to hybrid roles or remote roles as well. So going in when you're applying that this is going to be a remote role. I also wouldn't necessarily look past working with a recruiter. I have worked with a recruiter a few times, and it sort of just helped me shape what it is that I would be looking for within my next role. And you can get some that are like local to Edinburgh. You could get a recruiter that kind of looks for jobs in the UK, outside of the UK. But yeah, totally understand why we had two digital people move to like the Isle of Skye once we were able to work hybrid and work from home. So I can see why you would want to do that.
Yeah, I'd pretty much echo that really. I think a lot of roles these days will take that hybrid role or hybrid working approach into account. I think it's an extremely difficult thing now for businesses to kind of mandate a 5 day in the office now. I think the world's changed beyond that now. And so I like to think a lot of companies are taking that into consideration already. But I guess my key bit of advice just be to be open-minded with the roles that you're applying for. I mean, I think certainly digital marketing is a broad spectrum. You know, that could be display, it could be search, it could be social. There's so much involved in it. And I think you'll only really identify where your passion point is by throwing yourself into any one of those roles. Because I think that's a really important part of the career identity piece, is that it's okay not to know exactly what that specialism is before you start in the world of work. You'll probably find that out just through experience. So I suggest be open-minded and apply.
Thank you, guys. Do we have any other questions, or even just, you know, some thoughts and feelings about kind of what we've discussed today, or is everyone sessioned out?
Yeah, I've got a question.
Great.
I was curious if you've always worked agency roles, if you've worked also in-house, and if you have worked both, which one maybe you preferred, or if you have only worked agency, why you chose agency and why you chose to stick with it and not try in-house.
Love this question. Great question. So I started out working it was actually a Dutch company, and it was basically like Trustpilot. And I did really enjoy working in-house. We had like our own in-house studio, like copywriters, everything like that. I did really enjoy it. I do think that, because this was when I was doing like a year in industry, that by the time I'd left and graduated, something I'd always said was like, I want my next role to just be different. Like every day needs to be different. Otherwise I will just get bored. I'm someone that is very like always burning the candle at both ends, which is probably quite bad, but it is really important. When I came to the agency, just the variety of clients was what really interested me. The fact that, yes, it is fast paced. Some days it is 8 hours, but I think because you've got that variety, you just know that you're always challenging yourself. You're always working on something new. If you want to work on whiskey one day, you can. If you want to work on Kraft Heinz and look at different types of ketchup another day, brilliant. And I think if you weirdly have worked in hospitality, stay with me, it's a bit of a weird analogy. It's very similar to an agency because your studio is quite like your kitchen. Your clients are like your customers. Everyone has a different allergy or a different expectation, or they want something that isn't even on the menu, and you're just kind of like in between middleman. But that fast-paced energy is something that a lot of people can really thrive in. So I think if you like that, then an agency is a great way to kind of kickstart your career. That being said, if there is a brand, or if there is a product, or if there is something you are really passionate about and you want to pursue client side, I think that must be so rewarding. I know a lot of clients that absolutely adore the companies that they work for and the products they put out, and they're really proud of it. So I wouldn't necessarily turn it down in any way, shape, or form. But I think when you're just starting, agency does take the edge because you've just got all the energy, you've got the time to do it. So yeah, I'm biased, but yes, that would be one.
Yeah, I'm probably a bit biased as well, but I guess speaking from like the media side of the marketing industry, which is where I've always worked, I started out in like media owner side. So I worked in outdoor advertising, which is a really kind of laser focused niche media channel specialism, which was really, really valuable for kind of the education that I got then of how the industry works, what an agency even is, because like in the first few years, I still didn't really understand what that was. But it did, even within that role, which I did enjoy, I thought kind of like Kate says, the constant variety of working in an agency environment where you've obviously got the variety of clients that you work with. And also from a media point of view, I get to now work across virtually every media advertising channel, not just outdoor, and build plans for clients in that way. So that's really what appealed to me from an agency point of view. And as I say, we're both extremely biased people here, but I think it's the variety that agency life offers that perhaps other roles don't in the same way, which is why we're both still agency hardcore.
Perfect, thank you. And
No
yeah,
worries.
I was curious, like, do you think agency is a really good area to focus on to try and find like your speciality? Because that's what I'm trying to figure out right now. It's like, what is that one speciality I can say that is what I want to focus on? I guess it's a good chance to try out so many different things, and then you would get the chance to focus in on that.
Absolutely,
Yeah,
yeah. Because
absolutely.
even within agencies, there are obviously different types. Because like obviously Kate works in the more creative side of the agency world, and I work in media. Now they're incredibly connected, but there are two kind of slightly separate disciplines that work together on behalf of a client, etc. So yeah, I think even within what type of agency it is that you want to work in, you'll only really find that out by getting as much experience as you can.
I
But
also think,
yeah, sorry, Kate, you going?
yeah. I also think as well from a like environment point of view, when you're in an agency, you're a smaller team, so it's not as big because it might not be as corporate, and so you're constantly surrounded by people that all have their own kind of little specialisms and unique skills. And so if you're in a position where you're trying to figure it out, you can start as a specific role, but like we've just hired someone and he's working as a social media exec for us, but he expressed that he wanted to do more in terms of digital. So now for the next 5 weeks, he has an hour with our digital team just to kind of find out more about what they do. I think the learning opportunity is probably a little bit more fluid, and that's really helpful, or at least it was really helpful for me because I just did not know. I wanted to do it all, and you obviously can't do it all, so you need to figure
Thank
Great,
you.
yeah. Olivia, do you want to go ahead?
Hello.
Hi.
My question was, do you have any advice for trying to grow your own personal network or any networking tips?
it out. Ooh, yes. You want to start, Michael?
Well, I was going to say, without it being too obvious, I think the sooner that you establish a presence on LinkedIn, for example, the better. I think it's one of those things that even Kate made me aware of before today's session, that I liked one of my own statuses, so I'm not exactly the big expert on this, but it is a great way for prospective employers to find you, to find like-minded people, even just to start conversations and kind of navigate outside of the space that you're in. I think it's a really good base to start from. And then there are ways to obviously use that, etc., as you advance. But I think having that presence initially, even if you are just a student or in your first role or whatever, it gives you that foundational presence. And then if you do want to go for jobs, etc., it gives you the ability to see who works for certain organizations, etc. You've got the ability to get in direct touch with them, which is something that LinkedIn's really made possible, as opposed to just kind of the generic, here's my CV email alongside the 100 others that they're getting. You can make a personal touch. So I would invest attention in that in as much as you possibly can with the experience that you've got.
Yeah, I think that's really good advice. I think networking as well, if you're someone that's like super extroverted and confident, it's quite easy to do. But I think if you're, find it a bit difficult to just go up to someone and strike a conversation, then it can be a bit more daunting. I'd also say networking like goes beyond sort of work events. I think networking, it's Edinburgh, especially Edinburgh, Glasgow, the marketing scene is quite kind of community focused. I feel like if you know someone at work, they'll happily introduce you to someone. If you're out and about, the chances are you might bump into someone that you know. I was in Dublin the weekend and I bumped into what is essentially a client of a client, which was so weird. But I think it just basically goes beyond those initial events. But when you are just starting out, I do think coming to things like this, God forbid I plug our own talk, but like if you go to the marketing society and you go to these events, that is a good way to get to know someone. And I should also say you can connect with me and Michael on LinkedIn, even if he does like his own statuses. And we will also be here to kind of speak over message if you have any other questions or anything like that. And we'll also be at a lot of these events along with a lot of the other flag team. And we are always a friendly face. We will not shut you out in any way, shape, or form. So if you come over and you say, oh, I was on that talk, then that's great. You've already got one connection, which is great. So hope that helps.
Thank you.
Any other questions from anybody, or we all content with the content?
Nice.
Oh, that was lame. Okay, well, if nobody has any other questions, I am going to ask something quite strange of everyone, but this is something that we're kind of doing to build, I want to say build community, but I guess taking screenshots isn't really doing that. I'm not sure, but I want to just basically take a wee screenshot photo of everyone that's on this call, please, just so that we can share on socials. I'm going to have to do it twice because everyone's spread across 2 pages. So if everyone's comfortable, anybody who is okay with having their photo taken, if they could just put their screens on, that would be really, really great. So I'll do it one time for everyone I can see on this screen, and I'll do it again for everyone on the second screen. Okay, right. Here we go. Here we go. So everyone that is comfortable, just say cheese. Cheese. Fab. Thank you very much. And one more time for those that I can't see on the second screen. Everyone say cheese. Thank you. Sorry, I know that's so awkward to do on a Zoom call. I really appreciate that. Thank you. And yeah, just again, a really big round of applause to Kate and Michael for coming and speaking to everyone this morning. It's very much appreciated. And if there are any other follow-up questions that you guys have, please don't hesitate to send us all a message. As they've both said, please connect with them on LinkedIn. Please keep taking a look at the website for the Marketing Society. Come along to these events, get involved, because this is literally what we're here for. So yeah, thank you. And nice to meet you all.
Classic. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.